Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the
Tag two.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Remind podcast. Today we are talking about why we feel so overwhelmed in the holiday season according to neuroscience. I'm excited for this one, Dave. It's a crazy time of year.
Oh yeah, gee, hasn't it been building up? And only a couple of months ago, was it January? To be honest.
This year's flown. It's been
Oh,
absolutely wild. I'm really particularly excited about this episode because I run at my 10-week program literally every 10 weeks. It starts and finishes every 10 weeks. And I always warn the participants in the program over the Christmas season that it's the wildest every year. And I'm excited to talk about this in this episode because we're going to go into some of the reasons why. And when we're
mm,
thinking about intergenerational trauma and we're thinking about all of that ancestral stuff and triggers require a stimulus in order to bring things to the surface. And what better time than Christmas? So we're going to be
oh,
talking a bit
jeez,
about
yeah.
the family stress, the family dysfunction, the expectations, the financial pressures, the letting kids down, all of it. We're going to be covering so much today.
My God, because it's not just you talk about a trigger or a catalyst. The holiday season, especially this one, the granddaddy
Just go swimming
of
in it.
it's sort of like you're not going to be short of a catalyst. You're not going to be short of a stimulus, and it's almost going to be like a barrage of different stuff, big and
Yeah,
small, right? Even just
exactly.
some people love wrapping presents. For me, it's not a big one, but then you start to buy presents, and then oh my god, just as everything feels like it's just crazy. So,
Yeah. So at the top of this conversation, I think we need to touch on stress. And we have to touch on stress because stress is at the fundamental basis of everything that we're going to talk about today. And
mm,
most people will agree that Christmas is a stressful time. You even go to do your normal grocery shopping in Christmas, like over that season, and it's
mm,
wild at the shops. Absolutely
yeah,
crazy. Um,
and there's lines everywhere, people everywhere.
a
If
lot
you
of
fit,
flashing lights, a lot of Christmas
oh,
carols, a lot.
talk about overwhelm, and
It's
then you got to buy a turkey
overstimulation.
or
Totally.
or just all of that, and then suddenly things run out, and
Last
then
Christmas, I was going to say, last Christmas, you could not buy a turkey in Australia. It was crazy.
you're
So
suggesting they all got gobbled up. Is that what happened?
you're so funny.
Well, there's a Christmas pun. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, there is. So starting with the idea of stress, if we go, I'm not going to just hold on, guys. I'm going to go into a little bit of the science. So to really understand our conversation today, we're going to go into a little bit of the science of stress and what's happening in the brain, because obviously I'm a neuroscientist. That's my thing.
Hmm.
Um, and the first step in a stress response is actually perception. And this is an interesting one because people focus on the physiology of stress. But the thing is, in order to have a physiological stress response, we first have to perceive something to be stressful.
So
And
in layman's terms, we're going to sort of say the physiology is what you're talking about is the physical chemical response within
mhm,
your brain, i.e.,
yeah,
the neuroscientistness.
yes,
But for that to happen, there has to be something come at you, like a
yeah,
stress, whether it be something physical, whether it be emotional,
we have to
and
perceive
we'll
some kind of threat.
call it the trigger.
Yeah, the stimulus for the trigger, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So sorry,
So
I just wanted to come in with
no,
that.
that's awesome. And I think we'll focus on the trigger or the stimulus after we go into stress. So the
Beautiful.
first step of stress is that we have to perceive something to be stressful.
Mm,
Some very brief examples might be not having enough money to buy the kids the presents that they want, or knowing that you have to deal with your in laws if you struggle with that relationship dynamic.
hmm
Um, and then once something is perceived as stressful, we have an activation of something called the sympathetic nervous system.
hmm
And this is part of our autonomic nervous system. So this is really automatic. We do not have any say in this. It's as natural as blinking, right?
hmm
And most people would be familiar with the fight or flight response.
Hmm.
And the fight or flight response is really the first responder in preparing our body for a quick action in response to whatever the threat is that we perceived in step one.
Hmm.
So once that fight or flight response has been activated, then we get neurotransmitters released. And so those neurotransmitters, the way that you know that those have been released is because you'll have physical sensations. You'll have like increased heart rate, your
Hmm.
pupils will be dilated, you will be more alert, you'll feel almost like adrenaline going through your body, you'll feel that. Um, and those physiological changes are designed to turn your body on so that you can escape or fight
Mm.
against whatever the perceived threat is.
Hmm.
So that's the first thing. And then from there, there's another part of the brain called the hypothalamus, and that releases another hormone. And so this creates a cascade of hormones. So basically, imagine like a game of dominoes, and that hypothalamus releases the first hormone, and then that signals to the pituitary gland to release another hormone, and then that
Mm.
stimulates the adrenal glands to release cortisol, and
Wow.
so on and so forth. So it's literally a game of dominoes. And the cortisol has really important functions in all of this. It affects our blood sugar levels. If we have high levels of cortisol, it actually suppresses our immune system. So, a lot of
Hmm.
people will find themselves stressed over this period and getting run down and then getting sick. So, there's a whole lot of factors in that as well.
Well, that's
Um,
interesting. So, just a quick side note: what's the
yeah.
benefit of cortisol for any of us? Like,
Well,
it gets a bad rap. Cortisol gets this
I don't,
bad rap.
cortisol
You
doesn't
got to.
necessarily get a bad rap.
I've never heard it in a positive light. I've never heard someone go, this cortisol is great for that. It's always you got to lower your cortisol. Cortisol's a stress hormone. It's bad. It's what's the
But that's
benefit?
making an assumption that stress is bad.
Right. So, but what does it actually do? Does it is it part of the
It
like
it
trying to keep a fire going with just only putting tiny sticks in it? Does it help mobilize you, or is it?
well, effectively, we want stress responses. Stress responses are really important in keeping us alive. So cortisol is not a bad thing. It's just bad when it's misused. It's bad when we're releasing cortisol in response to something that isn't really trying to kill us.
Like
And it's that
over the top?
yeah, and it's the chronic. So the focus of this is going to come back to the perception
Hmm.
because that's the most important thing. It's what we perceive to be stressful. But cortisol plays lots of different roles. So, for example, triggers the release of glucose from the liver, and that gives us super
Right.
fast energy. So, if
Yep.
if you think about fight or flight, we need
Mm.
access to energy super fast so that we can fight our
Yeah. Or
predator,
outrun,
right?
do whatever. Yep.
Yeah. And so cortisol has really, really important functions.
So it's like an activator
Yeah.
almost. Yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
absolutely.
But when
And
people sort of
but
say that it's got a real problem, it's like when you're saying you're constantly in it
yes,
versus
and
just having it like a.
its job is to help you evade an immediate threat. The problem
Mm,
is that there's no bear chasing you. Your
mm.
mother-in-law is not a bear. It might be uncomfortable, it
Well,
might
I mean,
be
some
whatever.
people might disagree with
She's
that. But anyway,
she's not trying to kill you.
depends what you've said over dinner after too many drinks.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that's the cortisol thing.
Hmm.
Um, as I mentioned, it's super important in that quick energy source. So glucose
Gotcha.
is the most bioavailable form of energy to the body, and that allows us to generate ATP, which is the cellular energy source, and it kind of helps to regulate a whole heap of physiological processes.
Mm,
But as we said, cortisol alone is not bad. Chronic exposure to high cortisol is bad.
gotcha.
That's when we start to have negative effects on health. So we then have this kind of feedback loop. So as the cortisol levels get higher and higher and higher, the hypothalamus and the pituitary start to decrease the production of the hormones because those hormones were to stimulate the cortisol. Now that there's a high concentration of cortisol, they don't need those hormones anymore. So
Okay.
that helps to regulate the stress response and kind of it turns it off. It's like, okay, I've got the energy, I've got the response that I need now. I'm ready to go. We don't need to keep ramping it up.
Hmm.
So, um, the holiday pressures is where this gets really interesting. And as I said, we're coming now into understanding what is the perceived threat in all of this. Because
Mm.
if you ask yourself the question, is not having enough money to buy my kid the present that they want going to kill me? The answer is no. But if we perceive it to be stressful or threatening, then our body will respond with this
Mm.
stress response. So, financial pressures is a really big one. And whether that's
Well,
financial,
I mean, cost of living, right? I got.
that's what this is
I was just
exactly.
going to jump in there. Cost of living, and the price of toys and presents aren't getting cheaper.
Yes.
The food is not getting any cheaper. It's getting worse.
Dude, we're
Like,
just driving to have Christmas with my mum, who is interstate, and even the cost of diesel, like to
mm,
travel during the holidays, everything is ramped up. It's like, you buy a cake on any normal day and it's $100, say it's for a wedding, and all of a sudden it's 400. They do the same in the Christmas holidays.
yeah,
Everything, travel, flights, accommodation, everything gets the holiday
mm,
taxes. And so even traveling during the holidays can be a significant source of stress. So it's super expensive to host events.
mm.
There's
Oh,
so much going on.
and this is all of these things are normally stressful in their own right. Like, if you decide to have a dinner party and you call around some of your closest friends, and let's just say you do a little intimate sort of party of six, that in itself is going to have its own stress,
Yeah.
because you want to host it, you want to have a theme, you want to get people invited. Some people might want to ask if someone else can come, other people can't make it, and then suddenly everyone comes, but suddenly you've got this issue that two of your chairs break. And then, but then in the holiday time, especially Christmas, you've got that potentially.
Hmm.
Plus, you've got the expectation of you need to do the dinner party, because normally, at least in my circle of friends, having a dinner party isn't something that is forced on you. Where
Hmm.
Christmas, there's this expectation. We need to get together because we're family.
Yeah,
If we don't
exactly.
get
So there's pressure
together,
to conform.
you don't love me. You don't want to be part of this family anymore.
Absolutely. And this is where we bring on, it can be even the presence of tradition can be a stressor during this season. We can have mismatched expectations, mismatched
Mm,
priorities. So, tradition, something as simple as, well, this is what we do because it's what we've always done, it's a family tradition,
mm,
adds pressure without context of what's going on in your life at the time. And, is that adding more pressure? Is it adding more stress than is needed at that time? So,
yeah.
100%, it's pressure to conform. And I think this gets even more complex when you have marriages and blended families, and all of a sudden you've got
Wow.
multiple
Yeah.
families having expectations on,
Hmm.
you feel like you're being pulled in every direction.
Hmm.
So yeah,
There's a
that's
lot
a
of
huge one.
it starts to think. I know I've sort of cut you off, but it starts to think or I'm feeling there's a lot of silent killers coming into this equation, because it's sort of like things that are happening in the background that you're not necessarily aware of. You're just
Yeah,
feeling the pressure.
you're feeling it. Yeah.
And let's just look at, say, work for an example, and this works in two parts. If you have time off during the holidays, you have to work harder before you go, because you got to get
Most
things
people.
done.
Yeah.
And most people have a deadline of
Hmm.
before I'll get done before Christmas.
Yeah.
And some of those get sort of pushed up and then sort of compressed. And then when you come back, you've got this sense of, oh, the stuff I planned to get started after Christmas or after New Year, then all starts firing off. And then what do you have in between all of that? You've got holidays typically.
Which
And
aren't
that,
really a holiday, are they? They're
well,
exhausting.
if you wanted to just relax, and you'll be happy with a Christmas that is just low key, most people look at you and go, "You're the Grinch." right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You just
My
want
idea was to call this episode "How Not to Be the Grinch This Christmas."
yeah, or maybe we should just put a thumbnail, Merry Grinchmas. Um, but some people just need that to get their capacity back, and then they have
Yeah.
these holidays from work, which is packed full of expectations, and they go rolling into like the first week of January, just sort of going, holy moly. And maybe how do you relax when you're in this high pressure situation? Hello, alcohol.
Yeah, numb it out. It's the only
And
way.
or
I
other
see
ways.
memes, like a lot of memes kind of going, "Oh, it's the only way that I'm going to get through this." And actually, years ago, I only had one child at the time, so he must have been really young. And I made homemade Baileys, and I put
Oh,
put it in little jars, and I wrote a card for all of his daycare teachers, and I gifted it to them for Christmas and said, "My child's probably the reason you need this."
love it.
And so
I hope you labeled it
today,
Ashley's as opposed to Bailey's.
today Ash would not speak like that or speak that over him, but it did make me laugh, and I was like,
Mm,
yeah. But you raise a perfect point, like, um, how do we cope? And I think we'll come to that, the coping strategies as
mm.
opposed to
Because
really, yeah,
I guess what we're doing right now is we're just sort of bringing to light all the silent things that sort of seem to happen,
mhm,
or about it, but it's sort of like when you unpack it piece by piece, there's a lot to unwrap, and I'm just loving these
yeah,
Christmas puns for those who are catching up. Um,
yeah,
that it's like you're forced to be with people that you may not want to be forced with, or
yeah,
you are being with people that you want to be with,
yeah,
but there's a pressure, there's a tradition, there's an expectation. Then
mhm.
you've got the fact that you might have had a horrific year and you're landing into this holiday period and you need to relax. How are you getting your capacity back? Well,
Yeah,
you're having to
exactly.
go through all that. And remember, the year before, well, it was probably no better than this year. So you've just gone 2 years potentially worth of just not catching a break. You
Yeah.
then potentially decide to soothe with substances, whether it be, smoked or whatever, right? Drunk. And then that causes an issue because you might say something or you might get pushed to a point, then guilt and shame then sort of come into it, or the fear of all of this happening. And then suddenly, if you go back to last week's episode, your chair squeaks and suddenly you fly off the handle.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So people's tensions are running high, right? People's
Mm,
threshold becomes, because all of these perceived stresses are building up, building up, building up. And so your threshold becomes so narrow that the
mm,
smallest thing pushes you over the edge. And I think that, family pressures is a huge one. So there is so much unresolved issues within families, and stuff that escalates during holiday seasons, and people are triggering each other. And, I know for us, our family, or my family in particular, all lives interstate. And so I don't spend a lot
mm,
of time around them. So for me to be out of my comfort zone, first of all, but then spending a lot of time with people that I don't typically spend time with, that there's wounds rubbing against each other like sticks about to light a fire, about to ignite a fire.
ooh,
And so it really forces us to be so much more conscious, and tensions rise, and it leads to increased
mm,
stress. Um, Another really massive one, which I think is also super important to note, is loneliness around that season. For a lot of people, it
mm,
reminds them of what they don't have. And there was a Christmas a few years ago, we didn't go anywhere and we didn't really have plans. So there were some people from our church congregation who didn't have family and didn't have anyone here. And we just organized to go and meet in a park in the city and had a picnic afternoon, just so that they weren't alone. Because
nice.
I think when you're separated from loved ones in your normal day to day life, that's hard enough. But when you're separated from loved ones during seasons that's all about connection and all about uh, family time and quality time, that can be really tricky. But
Mm.
second to loneliness, or not second to in a hierarchy, but in addition to loneliness, is grieving and like, for instance, if someone has lost a loved one during the year,
Mm.
and this is the first Christmas, it's a big milestone, and it brings up a lot of emotion because we'll be playing in our mind, that's the seat they would have been sitting in, and that's the song they would have
Yeah.
been singing, and this is the shirt that they're normally wearing, and all
Mm.
these kinds of things. So grief escalates in a really big way over the holiday season.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's huge. Oh, I just thought of another one. I'm divorced from the father of my children,
Mhm.
and divorce and separation can cause a lot of trickiness over this season as well, because of course Christmas is one day, so who has the kids? There's always a parent who's missing out. And so navigating that can elevate stress. Like, it's another
Well, it
thing that
forces you
feels like,
to have a discussion with your yeah, the person you're co-parenting with. And if everything's great, that's awesome. But if things aren't great, then it's just another reason that you have to start to talk about things,
yeah,
which just adds it. And I think really, if anyone listening here hasn't got that sort of real sinking feeling in the pit of their stomach, like, oh God, because I'm feeling even just talking about that sort of like, oh, like, wow, yes, yes. That's kind of where we're at. The thing is, just know there's a lot of sort of silent things happening underneath, and they're not really silent, but if you overreact or someone says you're overreacting, then just sort of
yeah,
be know that these are the things that are happening. And as Ash said at the top of the show, your body's dealing with all of this at a much higher rate because all of these things are going on. And typically, when you're under stress, you're not necessarily cognitively thinking
yeah,
why. And you
yeah,
don't have the
absolutely.
capacity to sort of go, oh, this, I'll box that over here and do this over
Yes.
there and da, 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 da. No,
Yeah.
you're in your sympathetic, which means I need to survive this moment and get through to feeling safe,
Yeah,
essentially.
100%. And I think we sort of touched on it, but it is actually a really important point, is just the overstimulation. So
Mm.
the Christmas season is so loud and so chaotic and so busy, not just busy with a lot to do, but busy in a sensory sense.
Mm.
And, there's flashing lights, there's noise everywhere, there's people everywhere, there's kids because it's school holidays, so there's kids laughing and screaming and playing and crying and
Hmm.
all the things. And that sensory overload can really tip people over the edge into a stress response, into
Mm.
a survival response. So when we're thinking about, I mean, the next logical step in this conversation is,
Well,
if you're
how do we
resonating,
survive it?
what do
Yeah.
we do? Yeah.
How do we
How do we
survive it?
survive? And oh my gosh, there's so many things that flood into my mind. I don't know where to start, but I think because this is where we just were, I will go to the
Mm.
sensory side of things.
Hmm.
Really be mindful of your sensory experience. If you are feeling like your capacity, your threshold is getting more and more and more narrow, then that's going to require body awareness. So I would ramp up any kind of body awareness practices. We
Hmm.
have a whole recording in our podcast YouTube channel. If you
Hmm.
go and have a look at it, maybe we can post the link in the show notes so that you can go
Yep.
back and revisit that. But up level your body awareness,
Hmm.
because if you get lost in the busyness of the season, you're going to completely miss the signals in your body that are just whispering and nudging you to slow down. Hey, just take a moment. And if you get it in those early stages where your prefrontal cortex is still online, you have such good body awareness in that early stage, it might only take you 5 minutes of alone time in sensory a low sensory environment
Mm.
to decompress and come back down.
Yeah.
But if you miss those early signals and you get to the point where you're about to bubble over, it's going to take a heck of a lot longer than 5 minutes laying in the quiet peace of your bed to decompress and unwind. So
Yeah.
listen to
And
your body.
I'd say, and going back to people who are not sure about prefrontal cortex, That's your rational thinking. That's
Yeah,
your
your
intelligence,
logic and
right?
reasoning.
Where you can go, okay, all right, I'm not going to fly off the handle because my chair squeaks because that doesn't seem rational and logical.
Yeah, and
But
I'm just
it's
look, that was a ridiculous comment, but I'm going to bite my tongue because it's not worth the that's the bit, that's the rational part of your brain
yes,
that actually intervenes when you're about to do something that you might regret. You
and
need that part of your brain online over this season.
have that awareness that more often than not, your rational thinking, well, let's just say your rational thinking is going to be offline a little bit more than you would like
Yes.
during this season because of everything we said at the start. So being aware of that, and as you said, finding some moments. So I would definitely say recognizing your feelings are your feelings, and you can't ration them away, especially during this point because it'd be very difficult. But taking time, as you said, to be mindful, journal out how you're feeling,
Yeah.
even if it's like 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
I know, and I'm one of those. How do I soothe? Doom scrolling, right?
Yeah.
That's not actually processing it. That's
It's
distracting.
not. And
But
it's not even restful.
no, because
It's
you actually you're simply distracting yourself. You're
yeah.
overloading your stuff with preferred stimulus.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
So to be able to have this sense of, okay, let's even if you can meditate, close your eyes, great. If you
Yeah.
can't, journal. If
And I
you
think on that, like when it comes to how to cope, guys, you know the answers for the most part.
Mhm.
Meditate, do some deep breathing, journal, listen to some soothing music, get out in nature, ground yourself. These are not, earth shattering things. I will come into some other ones that you may not have thought of, specific to, I guess, the stress response and nervous system function. But I
mm,
love your point about journal. Do the things, really ramp up and be intentional about the things that you know are good for you
yeah, well,
because you need to set yourself up for success.
you just write your feelings. You don't need to write the answers. You don't need to pretend. You just simply put pen or pencil to paper about how you're feeling. That in itself is quite cathartic,
Yeah,
because you said at the start that the sympathetic nervous system, that is the one that is action driven. The opposite to it's obviously the parasympathetic.
parasympathetic.
I mean, I'm saying obviously because I have a PhD. Well, I don't, but anyway. Um, and it's getting into that parasympathetic, which is the more restful, and you're going to find yourself probably not sitting in there quite a fair bit recharging.
Yeah,
So, um, another thing that I was thinking about, one of my favorite, is jump into something cold. There is
yeah,
like if you say I can't get out of my sympathetic or get into the parasympathetic, I would challenge anyone to stand under a cold shower and not get into their parasympathetic system. It is
yeah,
impossible. Um, it might feel a bit awkward and uncomfortable, but it's something we can quite literally push a button. It's one of the only things I know on how to
yeah,
do it if you simply can't. Or jump into like
yeah,
just an ice bath and you'll clear your mind real quick.
yeah. Totally. Um, I think some other non-super generic ones,
Hmm.
limit stimulant intake. Now, this is one that people don't often default to, but
Hmm.
keep an eye on caffeine intake. Keep an eye, right? Keep an
And just
eye.
full disclosure, Ash and I both drink decaf coffee,
Yeah.
right? So we do understand the whole thing of it's statistically proven that if you give up coffee, 70% of your will to live will disappear.
Hey, speak for yourself. I'm the
but you,
outlier of that statistic.
but
But
you know what I
limit your
mean. It's
stimulant intake because
mm,
stimulants will naturally increase your sensitivity to that stress response. It has to. So excessive stimulants, but also it's not just your coffee. Think beyond that. So think things like if you're having a Jack Daniels and Coke, anything with Coca Cola is going to be high in
Mm,
caffeine. So look for the caffeine sources that you wouldn't necessarily normally be drinking is a really important one.
yeah, it's a great point because especially if you don't get to sleep because you're doom scrolling at night, and then you wake up really tired because you stay up till like 12, and then you got to be up at 5,
Yeah.
and then the first thing you do is get up and crack a Red Bull in the morning, and then you know it's difficult. But as you said, these all play a part.
Yeah. Another really big one that makes that time of year tricky is because it is the holiday season, is people's routines get thrown out the window and sleep is a big one.
Mm,
So if there is one thing I would say prioritize over this season is make sure you're getting enough sleep. From a brain perspective, there is a reason that sleep deprivation is a form of torture. And
yeah.
sleep deprivation, there's been many, many, many sleep studies. You can just go to Google and you'll find sleep study research or sleep deprivation research. But sleep deprivation affects your mood, it affects your cognitive function, your memory, it affects your
Mm,
capacity to cope with stress. So, what that means is it reduces your window of tolerance, which means, like we said last week, for me, the squeaky chair on any given day, I probably wouldn't even hear. But with not enough sleep, the squeaky chair is like nails down a chalkboard.
yeah.
It act because I'm more activated. So
Mm,
that's a really, really important one. Another one that I really love is, and I love it because it's so inconspicuous. Like you could just do it. Have essential oils. Aromatherapy is really powerful.
okay.
So stress, and excuse the, it's not really a pun, but like frankincense and myrrh. The Christmas
Ooh,
season.
love the
But
Christmas pun. Yep.
frankincense and myrrh are actually really, and I laugh about this because I'm like, I feel like these people were onto something when they gifted frankincense and myrrh because they're really good for stress. They're really
So
good essential
it
oils for
helps you
stress.
just sort of relax a bit more. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
and aromatherapy is so powerful. The most common recommend, like the oil that comes to mind for people the most upfront is lavender. But
Mm.
surprisingly, lavender is really, really high in a naturally occurring food chemical called salicylates. And a lot of people actually go the opposite way with lavender. So for a lot of people, lavender sends them crazy. Like
Oh.
they get hyperactive. It's really
Oh,
weird.
wow. Okay.
But some other ones like lemon and any citrus oils are really uplifting if you're finding yourself low of
Okay.
mood. Things like a good alternative to lavender is clary sage. It's got a similar scent, but it doesn't affect people as much. Chamomile, rose oil is really nice. So, essential oils for specifically aromatherapy for the clinical relevance of those oils can
Mm.
be one that people don't think about. It can be really actually very powerful.
Well,
Um,
I think as you're sort of talking about all of this, it got me thinking about just general self-care. And I know
mhm,
all of these things we've been talking about have been that, but it's like being able to prioritize during this time. Okay, can I block out an hour to just do something for me,
yeah.
and let people know that you need to do it.
Mhm.
For those who enjoy getting a massage, get a massage, or just do something for yourself. Allow like Christmas has always been shoved down our throat
Yeah.
as a time of giving,
Yeah.
and I get it, and I love it, and I think it's great. But what is it like? What are you giving to yourself?
Yeah.
And so that becomes a real big trap of okay, I have to make sure everybody else is okay. And if you are one of those people, you can still do that. Taking half an hour or an hour is doable. Find that time and block it out like you're giving it to somebody else, so that
Mhm.
you can kind of bring it back because these dominoes you were talking about earlier on in the show, it's like you can see the dominoes happening now. During the day, you're overstimulated by all these things that are happening that we talked about. Then you need to spend an absorbent amount of time at night now having to soothe as opposed to regulating, and you're
Yes.
spending all this time
Yes.
soothing, and then suddenly it's getting really late before you basically
Yes.
pass out. You're waking up
Exactly.
in the morning, 3 coffees later, and then you're back into the same Christmas
It's
spirit.
a very toxic cycle, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
and
so that's one thing we haven't touched on is limiting screen time. If notice what you notice. If you notice that you are seeking that self-soothing, that's an alarm. Like that's a massive
mm,
red flag. If you are just wanting to doom scroll, if you are just wanting to self-soothe, that's a red flag. It's your nervous system trying to communicate with you. Scrolling and numbing out is not what you need right then. You need regulation. So, what are the
mm,
regulation tools as opposed to the soothing tools? Because soothing is like, yep, I'm going to stay swimming in this bath of stress and I'm just going to distract myself from the bath of stress.
mm,
Regulation is different. Regulation's like, I'm in the stress, I'm going to get out and rinse it off.
I feel the pressure, but
Yep.
it's not consuming me.
Yeah.
And, anyone could easily sit down, hold a phone, an hour later, "Oh, what just happened?" So you can when you're seeing that and you're sensing that, yeah, I get it, but allow yourself at least to, if you're not used to it, give yourself 5 minutes before you pick up the phone to do it, to
Yeah.
go, "Why am I picking up the phone to do it?" And just write out a couple of, even if it's just gibberish or crap or, dot points or whatever it is, put something to it. Then pick up the phone and reward yourself with it from the fact that you've just done some of that. And then next time, maybe give yourself 10 minutes and just creep it up just a little bit more, or maybe just sit still and be with your thoughts, no matter how fast and running and intrusive they are.
Yeah.
Just observe it and
Yeah.
then see over time. And then if you still need to, then pick up the phone,
Yeah.
then soothe yourself, but do it in not when you use the soothing by itself, you're going nowhere. When
Yeah.
you use it in conjunction with some of these techniques, now you're moving the needle just that little bit each time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just gave me another thought. Something that can be really helpful in maintaining accountability for these things is having someone else to be accountable for. So, if you know
Mhm.
that this Christmas season is likely to be pretty stressful for you, chat to some of your closest friends. Say, hey, I really don't want to spiral this Christmas. I have a tendency where Christmas overwhelms me. I don't enjoy it. I struggle to be present. Whatever it is for you, it's really stressful. Chat to some of your friends and see if there's a friend who's
Mm.
willing to be your buddy in the accountability of self care. It might be you guys catch up every day at the same time and try and go for a walk together. Or it might be
Oh,
um,
yes,
committing
movement.
to texting each other the
Mm,
5 things you're grateful for that day, or whatever
mm,
it is, so that you have someone else on that journey with you. And I think that's one of the things that I find that really impacts my health behaviors in particular is who I'm surrounded by. And
mm.
I often, the Christmas season gets me around people that I don't often surround myself with.
Yeah.
And so I like the patterns and behaviors of that permeate. And I was just thinking about this yesterday when I was walking in to pick my kids up, is often like, even when we go camping, there's a tradition of
Mm.
having snacks, cheese and crackers and
Oh,
all the stuff, right?
yeah.
And I was thinking, why do we do that? Because I'm not hungry and I would be totally fine without it, but yet we do it because it's tradition and we should get some snacks. And
Well,
because it's there, I eat it. And I go,
well,
"This is so
yeah.
silly." And I said to my mum, I said, "Mum, please don't stock up on all the snacky food over the Christmas period. I'm on a weight loss journey. I don't need
Mm.
it. We don't need it. Let's just be reasonable. Let's just be like responsible
Now
over
you
that."
say reasonable and responsible, but essentially, what is camping? It's sitting and sleeping outside and maybe hiking. Because outside of that, I mean, and I'm right with you. I look at it and go, when I go camping, what am I doing? Camp chairs out, you set things up. You're either lying on the bed inside the tent, or you're sitting outside, or you're going for a walk. or maybe you're doing something with the kids, kicking the soccer ball or riding a
Mm.
bike. Now, because you're camping, like you're focused, you're either having to do all of those activities all day, which no one does. And if you do, you're amazing.
Yeah.
But otherwise, what else are you doing? You're eating and drinking. So what suddenly
Yeah.
happens? Everything just goes up. Or you're
Yep.
camping with your phone in your hand,
Yeah.
sitting on just
Yes, totally defeats
instead
the
of sitting
purpose.
on the couch. So like
Yeah.
I get it with camping.
Yeah.
It's a bit more of a just we're doing all of this outside.
Yeah. But like even, with Christmas, the tradition of eat, drink, and be merry. That Yes,
Festive
and so it's
overload. Yeah.
all around that. So I know that I feel really sluggish and really snappy when and my mood really, really starts to depress when I've overeaten. Like,
Mm.
when I've just stuffed myself full as a goog, I feel horrible. So,
But
um
after Christmas lunch, that's a go-to. Like if you don't have a nap after Christmas lunch, you're having a problem.
on the accountability thing, where I was going with that was have a buddy, but also establish boundaries. So,
Mm.
with the accountability, it allows us to be really clear on what our boundaries are because we have to be accountable to someone other than ourselves for those boundaries. So that means protect your time, protect your energy, say no when you want to say no. Excuse yourself. I spoke to someone just recently who said they have got, or at the point of recording this, they have got Christmas functions on for like 6 weeks every weekend for like 6 weeks before Christmas.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, man, that sounds absolutely exhausting. And also,
Mm.
where are all my friends? Because I haven't been invited to anything.
I mean, and see, isn't that funny, right? We're just talking about someone who's got all these things going on,
Mm.
and we're looking at it going, "Wow, that must be terrible." And then part of you goes, "But nobody loves me."
Oh no, I was very relieved. Trust me.
But yeah, it's funny. It's funny how the human psychology can do that to you, because it's sort of like I don't really want all of that, but hang on, I'm not being invited to anything. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess it's be gentle on yourself. Be aware that this is
Be
going to happen.
aware. Be
Your
aware,
rational
be
mind,
alert, be responsive.
but also know your rational mind is going to be probably a little bit more hiatus than
Yeah.
normal, and that to be able to make sure that that is up as much as possible, as opposed to
Yeah.
out and it goes on holidays with the rest of it, then you need to be a little bit more mindful, a little bit more doing these particular techniques, simply because everything that's coming up at you is much higher than normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Amazing. Great episode, Dave. I think we went uh pretty we were thorough. I think we were
We
thorough.
were,
I would
yeah.
love to hear, guys, this is where I'm going to
Mm.
call out to you. I would love to hear, how do you experience this Christmas season? What do you need support with? Where are you at? Like, was this helpful? What's
Mm.
your commitment to yourself? Because remember, when you commit to yourself and you show up as the best version of yourself, only then can everyone else get the best version of you. So, what's your commitment? What are you doing to survive this season and not just survive it, but thrive it? We want to hear from you.
Absolutely. Because really, enjoy. We've just given you the highlights reel of all the crap things that can happen during the holiday season. It is going to be a time where you are going to have some fun. You are going to connect with loved ones that you don't necessarily
Yeah,
connect
you're
with.
gonna laugh.
You
You're
you
gonna,
go there's going there is this is a time to celebrate. This is a time to enjoy. So try and be as present as you can. Enjoy it. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Until next week.
yeah. Catch you soon, guys.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.